So if you're out there right now, maybe you're walking the dog or commuting or just staring out a window trying to grab a quick break from the noise.
Which we all desperately need these days.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just really thrilled you chose to spend this time with us because today we're diving into something that is going to ask you to deeply interrogate the architecture of your own
It's
convictions.
a heavy one today.
It is. I mean, we spend such an enormous fraction of our lives searching for certainty, right? We look for the perfect mentor, the right morning routine, or, the ultimate spiritual truth to just anchor us in what is objectively a very chaotic world.
Right, because the human mind is practically hardwired to
Yeah.
seek out that kind of cognitive relief. We want the shortcut to the summit. We want someone to just tell us, here are the rules, follow them, and you'll be safe.
Exactly. But there is a really terrifying vulnerability in that search because when we finally find someone who speaks with absolute authority or an institution that offers an ironclad guarantee of truth, the temptation to just hand over our critical thinking is immense.
It's intoxicating.
And the source material we are unpacking in today's deep dive presents this chilling argument about what happens when that desire for certainty completely overrides our demand for evidence. And it comes from a perspective that might completely upend your expectations.
It definitely upended mine when I first read through it.
Right. So, our single source for today's deep dive is a YouTube video transcript from the year 2026. The channel is called The Blind Muslim Yogi, and the creator behind this is a man named Osman.
And to really understand the gravity of his warning, we have to look closely at his background, because his biography reads like a collision of entirely different worlds.
Yeah, it's wild. He's an entrepreneur, but concurrently, he is a master level practitioner of yoga, meditation, and bioenergy healing. And we are talking about 5 decades of rigorous discipline here, 50 years.
Let's just pause on that number for a second. 50 years. During certain phases of his life, he was dedicating up to 18 hours a day to his practice.
18 hours a day? I can barely stick to a 20-minute workout.
Right. And even today, he spends a minimum of 8 to 10 hours daily just to, as he puts it, sharpen the sword. Those numbers warrant serious reflection. 18 hours a day of specialized meditative and energetic discipline leaves virtually no room for a conventional existence. It indicates a level of immersion that really pushes the boundaries of human endurance.
And the claims he makes regarding the results of that immersion are equally profound. By the time he was just 19 years old, he reports experiencing advanced, sustained spiritual states, specifically what is known in yogic traditions as samadhi.
Which is a massive deal in those traditions.
Yeah, and we definitely need to define some of these terms before we go further because he also mentions using principles of quantum entanglement for telepathic healing, and that he specializes in critical care recovery and terminal illnesses.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. Those are massive, scientifically loaded terms stacked right next to highly esoteric concepts. How does the source actually bridge a physics concept like quantum entanglement with telepathic healing?
Well, he bridges it through a highly specialized framework of bioenergy. In his view, the ancient systems of healing and the modern observations of quantum mechanics.
Where particles remain connected and interact instantaneously regardless of distance, right?
Exactly. He believes they are describing the exact same underlying reality. He approaches his bioenergy healing not as some mystical parlor trick, but as an applied science. He argues that by operating at an advanced state of consciousness, a practitioner can actually influence the energetic blueprint of a patient remotely.
Which is why he offers a premium, paid energy healing service for these highly specialized critical cases, particularly terminal illnesses, through his website, yogawellness786.com.
Right, but he is very careful to state that this is complementary to the medical field. It's not a total replacement for conventional allopathic treatment. It's meant to address the gaps that standard medicine might miss.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction. And at the same time, his overarching mission is to strip away the complex, superstitious protocols of ancient traditions. He actually offers his simplified, result-based yoga and meditation techniques entirely for free on his YouTube channel.
Because he's aiming to revive this lost science for the general public, so they can improve their health, their peace of mind, and relationships without needing to pay for premium services.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We have that individual, Osman, who has spent half a century exploring the absolute limits of human consciousness, who operates a highly successful healing practice. And yet, the entire focus of his 2026 video is an urgent, almost desperate warning to his audience.
He is basically pleading with people to recognize the profound dangers of blindly following spiritual gurus or religious institutions without applying empirical evidence and rigorous critical thinking.
Yeah, he wants people to stop handing over their autonomy just because someone has charisma or a really compelling historical narrative.
And before we get into the specifics of his argument, we really need to establish a firm boundary for our discussion today, because the source material dives aggressively into the foundational claims of major world religions, specifically Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism.
Right. And to you, the listener, we want to be incredibly clear here. The creator makes highly specific, polarizing historical and theological assertions. Our objective today is to analyze the psychological mechanisms he describes and the structure of his arguments.
Exactly. We are treating his narrative as a lens through which to examine human belief systems in general. We are absolutely not endorsing, validating, or independently verifying the historical timelines, the religious critiques, or the theological claims presented in this text.
Not at all. We are here to investigate the human behaviors he's pointing out, not act as arbiters of religious history. We are not taking a side.
Right. With that said, let's get right into the first narrative Osman uses to illustrate this trap of unchecked authority, because it is a devastating portrait of wasted time.
It really is. He tells the story of a woman who is currently 80 years old. She spent nearly her entire adult life, we're talking more than 50 years, loyally dedicated to a spiritual method that yielded virtually no results.
It serves as this perfect, tragic textbook study of the sunk cost fallacy, magnified by the intense emotional weight of spiritual devotion. And when you look at how this loyalty began, the psychological conditioning is incredibly apparent.
The initiation happens when she is around 22 or 23 years old. She's attending this massive religious festival. And try to picture the environment for a second. You have a massive crowd, chanting, incense, a highly charged atmosphere.
Right, the sensory input is dialed up to 11.
Exactly. And at the center of this is a recognized guru, an authority figure who speaks with eloquence and commands the absolute attention of thousands of people. So she goes up to him, and he initiates her using something called the satip method.
The text describes this as the guru placing his hand or fingers directly on her forehead to transfer energy.
Yeah, and the moment he touches her, she experiences a massive flash of energy and instantly collapses. She falls completely unconscious.
Let's isolate that specific moment and look at the biological and environmental factors at play, because it is the linchpin of her entire 50-year mistake. She's a young woman in an environment specifically designed to overwhelm the senses.
Right.
The collective effervescence of a massive crowd inherently alters an individual's neurochemistry. Her nervous system is heavily primed with expectation and adrenaline. Then, an authority figure touches her forehead.
Which is a highly sensitive cluster of nerve endings.
Exactly. The physical overwhelm causes a vasovagal syncope, a sudden drop in heart rate and blood pressure, and she faints.
But the critical failure is how her brain interprets that fainting spell. She doesn't wake up and think, wow, my nervous system just short-circuited due to sensory overload. She interprets that physiological crash as irrefutable proof of supreme divine wisdom.
She assigns an ontological meaning to a biological event. Because the guru possessed the physical or energetic capacity to make her lose consciousness, she subconsciously concludes that everything he says must be absolute truth.
The power to overwhelm is equated with the power to liberate.
That's a great way to put it. And this association is further cemented by the religious texts she had been consuming, which dictated that a guru is a literal manifestation of God on earth, and their instructions are infallible.
Which sets up the tragedy, because the actual instructions he gives her are profoundly inadequate. Once she regains consciousness, the guru assigns her a daily practice. He tells her to perform a specific pranayama, a breathing exercise, but he instructs her to do only 3 rounds of it.
And from the perspective of someone like Osman, who has spent 50 years testing these methodologies, he immediately spots the flaw. A biological or energetic system requires a minimum threshold of stress or repetition to adapt and evolve.
Right.
Doing 3 rounds of this specific breathing technique is akin to doing 3 jumping jacks and expecting to become an Olympic athlete. Osman points out that to achieve even the baseline minimum efficacy, a practitioner needs to complete 18 to 21 rounds 4 times a day.
I just struggle to understand how someone maintains that routine for decades without realizing it isn't working. I mean, she gets married, she ages, she lives her entire adult life performing this inadequate 3-round breathing exercise every single day.
It's wow.
She experiences no profound spiritual awakening, no massive shift in her consciousness, yet she never abandons it.
The maintenance of that routine is tied entirely to identity preservation. If you practice a routine for 5 years or 10 years and you admit it isn't working, you have to grieve the loss of that time.
Yeah.
But if you've been doing it for 40 years, admitting its inadequacy requires you to face the terrifying reality that you have wasted the vast majority of your life on a delusion. The human ego will erect massive psychological defenses to prevent that realization.
It's far less painful to convince yourself that the subtle, invisible benefits are accumulating, or that the guru's wisdom is simply beyond your current comprehension, than to admit you were fooled in your 20s.
Absolutely.
And that stubbornness is really tested when she is in her 60s. At this point, she has been practicing the guru's method for 40 years. Osman encounters her, observes what she is doing, and directly tells her that her methodology is flawed. He explains that doing 3 rounds is useless, and he offers to teach her the correct, scientifically tested parameters of the practice.
And her response perfectly encapsulates the danger of outsourced authority.
She refuses his help entirely.
She explicitly states that she will only do what her guru told her to do. The memory of that one charismatic moment, that single flash of energy 4 decades prior, completely overrides the empirical reality of her own lack of progress.
And it overrides the logical advice of a practitioner offering a superior method, which accelerates her toward a devastating climax. We jump forward another 15 to 20 years in the narrative. She's now nearly 80 years old, and her condition is dire.
She has been suffering from chronic dizziness and drowsiness for years at this point.
Yeah, she is entirely bedridden, forced to sleep on a couch on the ground floor because she literally lacks the strength to walk up the stairs in her own home. For 3 months, she has been unable to consume solid food, surviving only on small amounts of porridge. She has accepted that she is waiting to die.
This is the grim, tangible result of rigid dogma. The spiritual stagnation eventually manifested as complete physical breakdown. And it is only at this absolute precipice, when she has nothing left to lose and her ego defenses are finally shattered by the reality of her mortality, that she allows Osman to intervene.
And he steps in with the bioenergy healing we discussed earlier, and the turnaround described in the text is staggering. He begins the energetic treatment, and within a matter of days, she regains her appetite and starts eating solid food again.
Which is incredible after 3 months of just porridge.
Within a single week, her physical strength returns to where it was before the 3-month decline. But perhaps most notably, the chronic dizziness and drowsiness that had plagued her for years completely disappear.
Osman attributes this rapid recovery to the intelligent nature of the energy healing, which he claims targets both the physical ailments and the deeply rooted energetic blockages caused by decades of stagnant practice.
But the most crucial breakthrough isn't physical.
It's psychological.
Precisely. The physical recovery acts as the empirical proof she needed to finally break the spell of the guru. After she regains her strength, she finally drops the stubborn loyalty. She allows Osman to replace her superstitious, ineffective 3-round routine with his simplified, non-sectarian, result-oriented methods.
Methods he refined over 46 years of active teaching.
Right. And the heartbreaking beauty of the story is that in her 80s, for the first time in over half a century, she actually begins to make real, measurable spiritual progress.
Think about the magnitude of that realization, though. She finally achieves progress, but she has to look back at 50 years of lost potential. Half a century traded for the memory of a single fainting spell. The cost of blindly trusting charismatic authority is paid in the currency of our own lifespans.
It forces a mirror onto you, the listener. How many of us are currently trapped in a milder version of that same cycle? Are we maintaining loyalty to a mentor, a career path, a financial strategy, or a belief system simply because the initial presentation was compelling, even though we have years of empirical evidence showing us it isn't yielding results?
The charisma trap is universal. It really is.
It is. And understanding how to recognize that trap requires us to look at the person pointing it out. Because Osman's own biographical narrative is just as compelling as the woman's story, but it moves in the exact opposite direction.
Right. While she spent her life paralyzed by an initial mystical experience, Osman achieved the highest peaks of mystical experience and decided to walk away from them.
His trajectory provides the essential context for his current worldview. He isn't critiquing esoteric spirituality from the outside. He is critiquing it from the absolute apex.
Let's dissect his early years a bit. The text states he attained multiple Kundalini awakenings and experienced his first samadhi by the age of 19.
And samadhi is generally defined in these Eastern traditions as a state of complete meditative absorption, right? Like a dissolution of the ego, where the practitioner merges with the object of meditation or the divine. It is the ultimate finish line for many seekers.
Yes, but Osman's reflection on living in this state is surprisingly blunt. He says that operating with multidimensional awareness and maintaining that subtle level of consciousness makes you, in his words, a bit freaky in normal society.
Which just shatters the romanticized popular culture view of enlightenment. We are frequently sold this idea that achieving a state of profound mystical awareness will instantly solve the mundane frictions of human life. You'll just float above it all.
And Osman is asserting the exact opposite. He describes experiencing the overwhelming love, bliss, and direct connection associated with the energy of God, but he also highlights the severe friction it creates when you try to interface with the standard structured world.
He had to make a choice. He is an entrepreneur. He has business interests. He has a desire to live a somewhat normal, functional life. He spent 28 years steeped in heavy, complex philosophical and esoteric traditions, and he basically reached a breaking point.
The sheer weight of maintaining those complex protocols, the endless energetic sensitivity, it became a burden rather than a liberation.
This represents a monumental psychological pivot. He transitions from a relentless pursuit of extraordinary, boundless, mystical experiences to a deep craving for grounded, restrictive structure. He wants boundaries.
He realizes that a human life, even one capable of profound multidimensional awareness, requires a simple, reliable framework to function optimally in the physical world.
And this craving for structure leads to a major life decision. 20 years prior to recording this 2026 video, at the age of 38, Osman revolts to Islam. He explains this choice purely through the lens of practicality and simplicity.
He desired a direct, uncomplicated method of worship that wouldn't tax his mental and energetic resources. The 5 daily prayers in Islam offered a perfect, rhythm-based anchor.
It allowed him to maintain a connection to the divine without getting lost in the esoteric weeds. He openly admits he didn't have a deep, scholarly grasp of the religion's history or complex theology at the time. He just needed the grounding routine.
He adopted the framework for its utilitarian value. The structure served his entrepreneurial life. But this introduces a fascinating vulnerability.
How so?
Well, when you adopt an entire ideological system primarily for its daily structural benefits, ignoring the historical and theological foundations, you are essentially renting a house without ever checking the foundation.
Wow.
What happens when the individual who has spent 50 years demanding empirical results in his energetic practice finally turns that same analytical lens onto the foundation of his chosen religion?
That is the exact collision that drives the second half of this deep dive. Osman decides he can no longer just rely on the daily rhythm. He initiates a deep, rigorous investigation into the core claims of his faith. He specifically targets the 2 most prominent assertions, that it is the religion of peace and the religion of absolute certainty.
The way he navigates the claim of peace is nuanced, but it quickly gives way to a much more volatile historical investigation.
Right. On the topic of peace, he acknowledges the harsh sociological reality. He admits that claiming it is a religion of peace in the current public sphere will likely invite ridicule, given the hypervisibility of violent radicalism.
However, he firmly separates that radical fringe from the lived reality of the vast majority of practitioners, including himself, whom he characterizes as entirely peaceful.
But as you mentioned, the sociology isn't what shatters his paradigm, it's the history.
He shifts from sociological observation to empirical archaeological demand. And a few months prior to recording his message, he makes a discovery that completely destabilizes his foundation.
He claims to have uncovered a massive empirical void. According to his research, for the first 200 years following the death of the Prophet Muhammad, there is 0 accepted, empirically verifiable scientific written record. No authentic contemporary manuscripts of the Quran or the Hadith from that initial 2-century window.
He asserts that the entire foundation of the religion for those 200 years relies exclusively on oral tradition.
And we must reinforce our boundary here again. We are not analyzing the accuracy of his archaeological claim regarding the 200-year gap. The focus is on the psychological earthquake this claim triggers within Osman.
The mystic suddenly demands a forensic audit. It's a jarring shift. Why does a man who heals people with invisible bioenergy suddenly care so intensely about carbon dating and textual provenance?
Because he recognizes the danger of the authority being claimed. when he compares this 200-year gap to the historical claims of other traditions.
asserting that Christianity has written records traceable near the time of Jesus, and Hinduism possesses texts dating back 4.5 millennia.
He is highlighting a contradiction. He looks at an institution that markets itself as the last and final religion, possessing zero errors and demanding absolute certainty from its followers. And he concludes that, functionally, it possesses the least empirical clarity regarding its own origins.
He demands empiricism now because he understands what institutions do when they operate in an empirical vacuum.
Without empirical proof, an institution has to rely entirely on narrative enforcement to maintain authority. And Osman sees this leading directly to deep, aggressive internal factionalism.
He points out the relentless historical divide between Sunni and Shia factions. He highlights how the rhetoric escalates to the point where certain Sunni scholars declare Shia followers to be non-Muslims, labeling them polytheists.
And beyond the macro divisions, he points to the exhausting, endless debates over the interpretation of the oral traditions themselves. One scholarly faction will look at a hadith and declare the meaning is black, while another will read the exact same oral tradition and declare it white.
The demand for absolute obedience based on fragmented oral history creates a really fragile ecosystem. And this fragility is spectacularly exposed by the admission of a contemporary scholar, which Osman views as the definitive proof of his concerns.
This admission is arguably the most explosive piece of evidence Osman presents. He references a high-ranking Islamic scholar based in the United States who actually happens to be the chairperson of the specific sect that Osman himself follows.
And this chairperson operates with an incredibly rare open doctrine. He publicly admits that after more than 1,000 years of endless factional fighting, political manipulation, and the inherent degradation of oral traditions, they simply cannot be absolutely certain about the authenticity of many foundational claims.
The scholar's exact concession is breathtaking. He admits that the institution is essentially following what they believe is most likely correct, while simultaneously acknowledging the very real probability that much of what they practice and enforce could be entirely wrong.
The sheer intellectual honesty of that statement is staggering. We are so accustomed to spiritual and institutional leaders projecting an impenetrable aura of infallibility.
Exactly. To have a chairperson of a major sect openly state, "We are making our best educated guess and we might be mistaken," dismantles the entire illusion of absolute authority.
Osman deeply respects the scholar for that vulnerability, but the implications of that vulnerability are terrifying for the average believer.
If the highest echelons of scholarship admit that the bedrock of the faith is probabilistic rather than absolute, then the institutional demand for unquestioning certainty is a fabrication. It is a marketing tool used to maintain cohesion and control, not a reflection of empirical truth.
And if this were just an abstract debate occurring in the halls of theology, it might not warrant the urgent warning Osman delivers. But the fabrication of certainty has devastating, irreversible consequences in the real world.
Osman shifts his focus to the collateral damage of this dogma, bringing the philosophical debate directly into the living rooms of the followers.
He examines the human toll of absolutism. When an institution demands that you treat a probabilistic guess as an absolute divine mandate, it forces individuals to make catastrophic life choices.
He provides brutal, specific examples of this collateral damage. He describes people who undergo emotional conversions, utterly convinced they have found the single, error-free truth. And based on this conviction, they begin dismantling their established lives.
The most jarring examples he provides involve the destruction of long-term marriages. He details scenarios where a woman converts to the faith, and after being married for 15 or 20 years, she is instructed by religious authorities that she can no longer remain with her husband unless he also converts.
She is commanded to sever the intimacy, the partnership, and the shared life of 2 decades.
Analyze the psychological coercion inherent in that scenario. A woman is told by a charismatic leader or a rigid text that to secure her eternal salvation, she must destroy her family.
She is blowing up a 20-year foundational relationship based entirely on the interpretation of an oral tradition, a tradition that the institution's own top scholars admit they cannot be absolutely certain about.
It is the tragedy of the 80-year-old woman amplified and externalized. She wasted her own physical vitality on a false certainty. These individuals are wasting their families, their communities, and their deepest relationships on a historical guess disguised as divine law.
Parents are alienating children, communities are fracturing, all fueled by the illusion that one specific faction possesses an infallible, empirically verifiable truth when the evidence suggests otherwise.
This brings us to the ultimate synthesis of Osman's warning. He is standing at the intersection of his esoteric past and his empirical present, looking at his audience in 2026 and issuing a profound plea.
He is begging people to stop outsourcing their critical faculties. Whether it is a single guru at a festival touching your forehead, or a massive global institution citing a thousand-year-old oral tradition, the mechanism of control is identical. They are trading you the comfort of certainty in exchange for your autonomy.
He demands that before we make these massive heart and soul decisions, before we leave a marriage, before we alienate a family member, before we dedicate decades of our lives to a specific methodology, we must demand empirical proof.
We must apply the same rigorous, scientific, result-based lens to our spiritual and personal beliefs that we would apply to any other serious aspect of our lives.
It is a formidable challenge, because demanding evidence forces us to step out of the comforting warmth of the group consensus. It is always easier to close your eyes, accept the touch on the forehead, and believe that someone else has figured out the universe for you.
Let's retrace the expansive journey we've taken today. We began by examining the hypnotic, biologically primed trap of the SATIP method, witnessing how a sudden physiological reaction coerced a woman into wasting 50 years of her life on a useless breathing routine.
We explored Osman's own complex evolution, from experiencing the isolating burden of advanced samadhi in his youth to seeking the pragmatic, grounding structure of Islam in his 30s.
And finally, we navigated his intense empirical awakening, unpacking the 200-year historical void in his faith, the intellectual honesty of the U.S. scholar, and the devastating real-world cost of enforcing absolute certainty without evidence.
The connective tissue running through all of this is the necessity of balance. True progression, whether you call it spiritual, personal, or psychological, cannot survive in the vacuum of blind faith. It demands an open-minded willingness to explore the unknown, strictly governed by ruthless scientific discrimination.
We have to be willing to interrogate our mentors, question the historical foundations of our institutions, and possess the courage to pivot the moment the empirical evidence demands it.
It is a heavy, intricate framework to apply to our lives. But in an era saturated with charismatic authorities and aggressive ideologies, it is essential for our self-preservation.
And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to consider long after you finish listening. We have spent this time dissecting the immense dangers of false certainty and the vital importance of demanding proof. But I want to turn the premise slightly on its head.
Okay, I'm listening.
What if the primary malfunction isn't the specific belief system, but the human craving for certainty itself? If our deepest, most unshakable convictions, the ones we are willing to destroy our marriages and families for, are frequently just a byproduct of historical accident, geographical lottery, and our desperate psychological need for comfort, what would happen if we learned to be completely unapologetically at peace with uncertainty?
What if the highest form of human achievement isn't finding the one absolute empirical truth, but developing the capacity to thrive in the terrifying, beautiful mystery of simply not knowing?
That is a profound question to carry with you. We want to thank you for joining us on this incredibly dense and challenging deep dive. We deeply appreciate your curiosity and your willingness to interrogate the architecture of belief alongside us. Keep asking the uncomfortable questions, always demand the evidence, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Take care.